I'm not matching profiles, I'm matching people.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I tell people, because, I talk a lot about how I ended up, clinically depressed and all of that. And I never really talk about like where it stemmed from. And it stemmed because of the family dynamic. So not only was I like that wife role, but people don't realize either, I have a sister that's 14 years younger than me. So when I was 14, I kind of took on a mom role too, because my mom was 41. She was like, oh my gosh, it was an oopsie type situation where she was just like, I'm 41 years old and I am starting all over again. And, here I'm 14 and my brother's 9. So she was, we were independent. And then a baby comes along. Well, I started kind of taking on the role as the mom for my little sister. Like, I literally would have her all the time. When I got my license at 16, I would take her everywhere I would go. And so then I really grew up very quickly in that mommy role and the wife role. So, and I'm a perfectionist. And so what happened too is that my brother was a troublesome kid, and a lot has to do with the fact that he's gay. And it's not because of what was happening so much around him, it was what was happening internally growing up and knowing that he was, different. And, at that time it was still taboo. It was still like you weren't as open about it. And so he had all those struggles. So he was a very angry kid and gave my parents a lot of problems. And because of that too, then I said, oh shit, I got to be even more perfect, because I can't give my parents any problems because they already have their hands full with this one. So then it put even more pressure on me to be the perfect child. And we're not all perfect. And so then I took on so much that by the time I went to college, it kind of like all hit me when I'm like independent at college. And I'm still kind of like enmeshed in that. My parents still call me about my brother, my sister, all of it. And so it's like I couldn't separate myself. And I just, realized with my OCD, perfectionism, all of that, that's what caused me to go into this, mental state of where I was just like, what's the point of living if I can't be everything to everyone? You just start getting into your head. And that's when I just became clinically depressed and everything. And that's when just went into a really dark place, sleeping all day long, not eating. And then finally one day was just like, you know what, screw this. I'm just going to take my life, because at this point, what kind of life am I living right now? I'm not. And so that's when I decided in college, I was just like, all right, I'm going to end this. And obviously it didn't happen. And I went to therapy, but that's essentially what led to that dark place was.
Yeah. I mean, is that where the transformation began at that moment? Where you really started
No, I mean, I tell people that it probably took me at getting divorced at age 35 that I started actually seeing somewhat of a transformation. And it wasn't until, and that's the thing, is I tell people all the time, it's so important just to share your truth and speak your truth. Because it wasn't until last year that I actually started talking about the fact that I had been depressed, all of it. That's when I really started the transformation, when I actually became vulnerable for the first time pretty much in my entire life, because I was taught not to be vulnerable, not to be weak, not to cry, all of that. That's how I grew up too. You pull your shit together. So it wasn't until last year that I just was like, screw it.
Do you realize that your search for perfection is really a search for protection? So by perfection, you're actually trying to protect yourself and all these things that you held in, all these emotions, all this vulnerability that you were told you can't have. And all of a sudden you kind of cut the hole in perfection. And all of a sudden, all these things came out. The vulnerability came out, all these things. And that's where the transformation began. When you took perfection, essentially as an ego, moved it to the side and replaced it with humility, is when this whole journey, it sounds like, just began.